everyone. Valentina Flores, CEO of Red Sentry, and this is the Ctrl-Alt-Secure podcast. And today we have Rob Petrosino on, and I'm really excited for this podcast. Rob, have you ever heard of something called AI? I don't know if you...
No. Is that what this podcast is about?
Yeah,
Because we're gonna have a
I'm
huge
so happy
problem.
you're on here, Rob, because AI is obviously like the buzzword of the year. I mean, it's been going on for longer, but I feel like I see it in every podcast, every panel, every speaking opportunity. And very often those people aren't like true subject matter experts in it. And I even get asked to be on panels all the time for AI. And I'm like, listen, like, I know what my lane is and I can talk about how attackers are using AI, but like, I'm not an AI guru. So I'm so happy to have you on today. I have so many questions that I'm sure the viewers have too, and just things I'm hearing that, just kind of this unknown around it. So really excited. I appreciate you jumping on. Why don't we start with just your role, what your expertise is here, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, so Rob Petrosino. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at a company down here in South Florida called Peak Activity. Been around for a decade. Been with the company for a little bit over 7 years. In that space, service a lot of B2B, retail, e-commerce customers on their digital transformation specifically. And I get to handle all the cool stuff like artificial intelligence, build out and implementations with customers. In addition to that job, uh, I also work with the FBI as a strategic engagement advisor on emerging technology, which right now is straight enough artificial intelligence. So realistically, what that is allowing me to help bridge the gap between the private and the public sector in relationship to
Yeah.
artificial
And,
intelligence.
so everyone listening, like, Rob knows what he's talking about. We're not just going to this isn't like a fluff piece. Like, we're going to talk about things that are really going on right now. Just things like the difference between ML and AI. Like, I see so many businesses using AI in all their marketing, and it's like, all right, well, it's not. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
I guess starting out, because a lot of the people listening are businesses, and that's who both of us market to. What are some of the ways that businesses right now are using true AI, and what are some of the ways they're putting that into their products and their business?
Yeah. So I think it's good to start out with that generative AI, which is brand newer to the block, right? It's the hot new kid on the block. The past 2 years plus has really made the splash and brought artificial intelligence to the market. What that is versus like analytical AI and machine learning, which has been around for decades, right? If you really wanted to say, do you know what machine learning is? If you do conditional formatting in an Excel sheet, right? You make a square green or red depending on the number. It's technically a form of, machine learning. So yeah, I think the big variation between the two is that machine learning side is very analytical. It's very data driven. It is geared towards making a very accurate analysis. And then generative AI is really geared towards making content that sounds, looks, or feels like it could be made by a human. Over the last 2 years, generative AI has kind of completely changed a lot of customers' expectations on digital experiences, right? So being able to type a very long question into Google and get an accurate response wasn't a thing 5 years ago, wasn't a thing 3 years ago, really, right? You were mostly searching by like keyword terms that you thought would pull up. Now with Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot, those searches are now able to use a large language model to refine the feedback and then give you something that's more meaningful. So realistically, in the day-to-day operations of an organization, the B2B side, right, a business, they're going to see implementations of generative AI that's for their end users or their end customers, regardless of what they do, whether they sell sneakers or HVAC installations, there's going to be expectations on that side. And then internally, they'll also have operational efficiency that can happen when it comes to generative AI as well. And they should be for some time using analytical AI, right? And Google AdWords and Google site traffic identification, that type of stuff has been always enabled by artificial intelligence. So it's a good way to kind of reference the two when it comes to organizations looking at artificial intelligence for the first time
So
for
yeah, I
a
mean,
long time.
generative AI becoming such a huge topic is now driving businesses toward looking more like the analytical AI, ML. How do I automate more? How do I streamline? But their generative AI is what's driving that conversation.
1,000 times over. Yeah, for sure. Generative AI, because it has such a low barrier of entry, right? Anyone can get onto chatgpt.com or Claude or Microsoft Copilot with an internet access and a keyboard and have access to generative artificial intelligence, which was not really possible for a very long time. Machine learning had a much higher barrier of entry, right? You had to have a lot of more systems, you had a lot more connectivity, you had a lot more understanding of coding and development to implement that type of work. So that big switch when OpenAI came out, even though OpenAI has been around for longer than people may realize, 3.0 and 3.5, that really changed the game when it came to access and people's understanding of what
And
AI could
so
do.
I guess businesses that are coming to you, do you see more often that businesses are excited about adding this stuff, or do you still see like that huge fear factor around it, or probably both? What do you recommend to companies who just like, should I even be looking at this? Is it too much for me? Where should they start?
So if you ask me this, I get asked this question like every 3 months. So, like, what do you think about businesses and their adaptability or willingness to adopt AI? Consistently since about 2 years ago, the artificial intelligence adoption curve has remained steadily increasing, right? Maybe not exponential, but hits a little bit of plateaus, but still growing at a positive rate. What's really stopping a lot of organizations is not fully understanding how or what AI enabled business, AI enabled teams looks like because of the amount of mis and disinformation when it comes to artificial intelligence tools that hit the headlines, right? It's much easier to bury your head in the sand and not worry about new technology. However, this is one of those that really does revolutionize or change how things work. So most organizations are interested, but I would say it's an even 50-50 mix of being interested and uneducated and fearful and uneducated, right? So I think that first step, number one, is you got to get yourself up to speed. What tools are out there? And I will give you the secret sauce. It is impossible to track every single artificial intelligence news, update, LLM, creation, etc., and do a full-time job. Full-time
Yeah,
job.
no, and I mean, it's coming up so fast. I think there's so much unknown around it, and specifically in the security world, like even if you're not using AI in your product directly, you're using vendors that are using AI. So it is
Correct.
everywhere, and that's what I tell everyone. Like, it's not like, should I use it? Like, you are using it, you will use it. Like, it's part of life now. So how do we do that better and more securely? And it's just like every other technology. Does it increase the amount of attack vectors that cyber criminals can use? Yes. But so does every single technological
Yeah,
advancement that we have. So I think it definitely brings more good than bad. And, we just have to figure out how to do it securely. When you're building out these products
100%.
or working on companies that already have it, I don't know if you're fixing it or just building it out fresh, how does security play into what you're designing?
Yeah, priority number one, right? Safety first and last, always. What's actually happening is kind of crazy. So, I was just reading the stat 2 or 3 days ago of all the generative artificial intelligence implementations that have been done to the market within this group of about 2,000 stakeholders. 30% said, or just under 30%, I think it was 29% said that they've had a security breach because of that
Yeah.
generative AI implementation. So already off the bat, that's scary, right? For anyone, you don't want to have
It's a
30%
lot.
of a large population saying that they're having a security breach, right? That's a lot to have. So realistically, when it comes to these implementations, there's a lot of different ways that large language models or generative artificial intelligence can be breached by bad actors, and those bad actors can be internal and external. We could talk about insider threats later. Realistically, if you're implementing these tools, you have to have a solid understanding of what these tools can do with the data you're giving it. And then on top of that is making sure the data that you're giving it is good data, right?
And
Ethical data,
not
meaningful
sensitive
data for
data.
whatever the use case is. Exactly, right? Like PII has, come and gone as the primary focus and will
Yeah.
stay the primary focus as of bad actors to capture, right? Artificial intelligence, when you give it a large swath of your internal data, can have access to
Yeah.
PII information. It could have access to SharePoint file links or emails or phone numbers or standard operating procedures or who to contact for what that now is leaked potentially to bad actors that can create a very sophisticated phishing or smishing scam because they've gained even more insight from that artificial intelligence tool that was connected to
Yeah,
some
the last stat
databases.
I saw, and it's probably increased since then, was that 11% of everything in ChatGPT that people were putting in was sensitive data, which is a pretty high number when you think about all the dumb stuff that's being searched. And I would never share my search history because it's probably embarrassing. The fact that like 11% is sensitive data is wild, but I mean, on the side, that's not really new to us. Like people are always the leak, like people are always the weakest point of any system. So of course, in generative AI,
Of
it's gonna be the
course.
same thing. People are gonna mess it up. Even if the technology is created really intentionally and with security first and last, you're gonna have people doing dumb stuff with it. So I think the training aspect and the education and talks like this, that's what really needs to catch up, and teaching people how to use it intentionally and how you want your employees to use it, like policies and even more restrictions, I'm sure are going to come out in the future on how people can input things. And I'm excited to see kind of what changes come around that side of it, controlling the humans as much as possible.
Yeah, of course. I mean, listen, realistically, if you're going on any AI journey, step number one should be AI governance. What is okay? What is not okay? How do we want to manage this? Who's going to have access and what that access looks like? What are the intended use cases? What are the not unintended ones? Great. Okay. AI governance is out of the way. Most
Right.
organizations haven't even gotten that far, which is issue number one. The fact that I think it was 60 or 70% are people using artificial intelligence, not just telling and just not
Yeah,
telling their
100%.
managers that they're using it for their day-to-day jobs, right? Like we used to talk about shadow IT many years ago. I'm sure you're familiar. Right. It's someone hiring someone to do something somewhere
Yeah.
that they probably shouldn't have hired to do. Now it's
Yeah.
shadow AI usage, right? People are just going to use AI to get whatever they need to get done faster. And I don't think most people realize, right, when you hop on to chatgpt.com and you open up an account, everything that you're giving that model and every prompt that you give is eligible to
Right.
train the next model, right? And there's a specific setting you got to go in and check off. So being aware of that is a good one. If you have employees, assume that they're using AI, talk to them about using AI, set a plan forward about how you want them to use AI, and then allow them to use tools that are safe and secure to do whatever they were already doing
Yeah,
with
100%. That's a
artificial
good point of
intelligence.
just, acknowledge that they are using it. Like instead of just this, I mean, okay, zero trust is a great principle. I love it as an idea, but I just think it's so unrealistic
Right.
to teach people to have zero trust in anything because, like, they are going to. So, like, how do we do it the most secure that we can within the restrictions of our business use case and what we're doing? Like when you're a startup and life's chaotic and it's the Wild West, you're not going to have all of these formal policies yet, and so just having these conversations and training everyone about the risks and things that are really happening, like, hey, this attack just happened because this information was put in there. Those real like use cases, I feel like go a long way instead of just like,
Yeah, I mean, like, right, real life use cases. Artificial intelligence has been used a ton for very sophisticated smishing, right, and phishing and SMS phishing attacks, right? You can duplicate a person's
right.
conversation style based on their LinkedIn post. You can duplicate their voice from a podcast like this one, right? So, like, you have to have the policies now set in standard to not accept just text, to not accept just voice, to not accept just a Zoom call, to approve an account transfer of, $100
Right.
or $100 million. So those things are gonna now get more sophisticated. And what we would traditionally be seeing at, your Fortune 100 or Fortune 50, as far as attacks, you're going to
Right.
see moving down the food chain because the technology is so easy to use where you can target a mom and pop, right? And
Or
eke out
50,000
information
mom and
from them.
pops all at once with one click instead of going after a huge enterprise that takes 2 years.
You're 100% right that now you're amplifying your ability to act
Yeah.
bad as a bad actor and create multiple threat vectors within a core group of
Yeah,
very
and there's so
similar
many
people.
ways that AI is going to help the defensive side of cybersecurity. There's so many ways it's going to help companies. It already is, and there's endpoint monitoring, and there's better. We're going to respond faster, but you know, if there's a race between the good guys and the bad guys are always going to be faster than us. I mean, it just is. It's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, here's the question I always get asked. Can we use artificial intelligence to detect artificial intelligence as being AI enabled X, Y, and Z, right? Phishing attack, endpoint attack, whatever it may be. The real answer is yes, but you need an aggregate amount of data to detect it. So your creation of the bad tool is always going to outpace the detection of the
Yeah.
bad tool, Google just came out today, as of recording day, with a tool called Synth ID, which embeds a little watermark that says like, hey, this image,
Mhm.
text, audio is actually AI generated. And they're storing it within Google's system. So if someone uploads a photo, it says like, oh, this was generated by Google Gemini. Well, that's great, but it doesn't cover
Right.
ChatGPT or Claude or a Minstrel model or a Dolphin open source model. There's some level of detection that will happen in enablement, but your creation tools or the AI that's creating more things is always going to outpace any of
Yeah,
the detection
100%.
stuff.
And as far as the bad guys using it, I mean, phishing is one of the huge things you already mentioned. I mean, phishing's already gotten better over the last 10 years before generative AI came out. I think back to when cell phones first came out and the emails, it's so far advanced and that's only going to increase
Yeah.
exponentially. But even, I mean, everything on the hacker side is automated. We get asked constantly, like, are you guys using AI to attack? And it's like, well, we're using it however the hackers are. Just if they're starting to use more AI and attack vectors and more tools, we'll use those same tools and we're mimicking whatever they're doing. I think people always expect the good guys to be ahead, and unfortunately that's not really the case here.
Yeah, it's definitely not the case. So, I mean, just talking about hacker tools, right?
Yeah.
OSINT, open source intelligence, right? Just to take it as a useful way of talking about phishing or smishing, right? So I'm going to go and aggregate as much data as I can about executive X so that if I send a phishing or SMS text scam to people, it feels real. It's verifiable. I have these different personal touch points to expose when I'm having the conversation with a person. Well, there is AI enabled OSINT tools that are advertising on Instagram.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing 2 years ago. That wasn't a thing 4 years ago when Instagram came out, right? I won't plug anyone specifically, but they're pretty easy to find, right? These AI tools that are going to go and scrape, be a web scraper, capture all this information about a specific profile, document that information, share it back with the internal users so that they can have a more sophisticated attack. And now AI is used in that area. So, even in this very fine, very, gray area of operational security and intelligence, there's AI impacting that. And it gets
Yeah.
interesting.
There's a blog that our team wrote, one of our senior security engineers, and I'll share it with this podcast actually. He used OpenAI to complete like a hack the box challenge. So he used it and like tricked it into hacking the challenge. And, I think that prompt manipulation and even just, prompt injection and like inserting false data. I mean, I think that's the other side besides just phishing and being better and sounding better. I mean, there are real attack vectors out there, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's always been the case. We've never been short of attack vectors for hackers. It's just kind of a new piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like prompt injection is a really easy one. Malicious prompting, going into an artificial intelligence tool and getting around the set use case of that tool to eke out information. I've gotten, right? Full transparency. I've gotten SharePoint links from chatbots that were enabled on websites, right? I've had them create legally binding documents to purchase things for one millionth of the cost of the item. And it's
Yeah.
fairly easy to do now because the models have restrictions, but getting around those restrictions would just take a little bit of creativity. So I think that there are some architectural implementations that you
Right.
can do to kind of thwart those. The most recent model is using a large language model to check the returned information of the RAG retrieval. So the user prompts something in, it'll go and source the information in a RAG format, create a return prompt, but before it goes to the user, a separate Sentinel artificial intelligence will check the prompt to make sure it's not giving away pertinent information. So there are architectural ways of doing this. But if you're just point buying an artificial intelligence tool off of Google search because
Yeah.
they paid for an ad for the best, HR AI chatbot, and you're just buying that thing and not doing your due diligence, it's probably not going to have that type of
Yeah. And then I
infrastructure
think for
behind it.
companies, I mean, most companies out there are building their own. I mean, obviously there's 101 new AI companies popping up every day. But as far as like companies that exist trying to
Yep.
implement more of it, a lot of them are probably using a company like yours, right? Or are they just having a team integrated
I
somehow?
So I think I wrote a blog post recently. It was called, your AI project is being held hostage. And the real fact of the matter is, because most internal teams can read a couple different documents and build something relatively quickly with, ChatGPT or Anthropic's OpenAI's APIs, they can spin up something very, very quickly and show intrinsic value. It doesn't mean that that's secure. It doesn't mean that's the right way of doing it. It doesn't mean that's the way that you should do it at enterprise or scale. I would say most organizations are going on this journey alone, and their project is probably being held hostage because someone internally thinks they have a larger skill set than they do and is potentially exposing the organization to issues, or they just are struggling and this project's falling behind and they're unsure where to turn. So yeah, there's a little bit of hubris happening for sure, which usually happens
And
when
I'm
new
sure
technology
there's
comes
the
out.
same thing within professional companies who are doing this. There's probably a lot of snake oil out there where they're the AI guys and they're building these tools, and it's probably not all it's living up to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So thankfully, we just got an announcement about 2 weeks ago. The FTC said that they're going to start cracking down on organizations that are saying that they're using artificial intelligence when they're not. So they just brought 4 cases out against different companies. You just kind of type in FTC AI lawsuit, and they are going after now organizations that are saying they're using AI and maybe misrepresenting the fact that they are or are not using AI. But it's an easy, just like being an AI public speaker, you can be an AI, snake oil salesman on the
Yeah,
SaaS
and
side
when
as
they
well.
say like, so when the FTC does something like that around like the quote unquote AI, is that including like ML and the operational stuff, or is that just generative? How does that work? Like, if a company's using ML but they claim they're using AI, what's the ethical?
So from what I've read through the lawsuits so far, it pretty much toes the line of an organization who is falsely saying they are using artificial intelligence and they were not using any artificial intelligence overall, big bucket, machine learning, or generative AI. And we saw a bunch of different organizations get caught for this through that lawsuit. But even prior to that lawsuit, Amazon's Go stores, right,
Mhm.
where you used to scan your palm,
Yeah.
walk in, take a thing, and walk out. It's what people were calling a mechanical Turk, right? They had a bunch of individuals sitting behind desks tracking what you were clicking, what you were picking up off the shelf. It wasn't a AI or machine learning model at all. So yeah, I think that this specific case was about organizations that saying that they were using it, but were not. And we'll see that potentially expand. But right, the FTC is really geared towards getting really bad offenders that are quite popular to deter organizations that are a little bit smaller from saying
So
or
if a
doing the
company's
same
doing
thing.
it correctly, they're using correct people with correct knowledge base to build it out. What are some of the competitive advantages that companies get out of truly implementing some of this stuff into their program?
Yeah, so I think a big aspect of this is understanding the use case. And I think I'll talk about 2 different ones specifically. Externally facing, if you're able to enable an artificial intelligence tool like a chatbot on the front of your website that is deeply meaningful, helps potential customer understand a product better and instill a level of confidence, you'll have a higher conversion on whatever that purchase is, whether it's a pair of sneakers or right HVAC, it doesn't really matter. That's a really interesting thing that's happening is we have the general market being digitally inclined overall now. Everyone walks around with a cell phone, so your website's got to be mobile first enabled. But now with the adoption of artificial intelligence, people want it to be even more easy for them to use or get the information. So that barrier is or that expectation of the customer is continuing to rise as they go through and start this purchasing path. So we're seeing definite time to completion of purchase drastically drop if you have those type of tools. Internally within an organization, we've seen projects that have cut weeks off of life cycles to do things like product copy or content marketing copy or advisement on what products to buy in specific e-commerce spaces or just general dashboard or project overview information that usually would take a project manager
Mhm.
a long time to do. Add a large language model on top of some of these internal tracking tools, give it to an executive, and reduces the number of questions that a project manager has to answer. So there are internal use cases that are just maximizing operational efficiency, which doesn't mean that you fire people. It means you can
Yeah.
take on more work, right? Which is a key differentiation that happens. just because you're better at doing things means that you could service customers better. And I think that's a part that a lot of people lose
Yeah,
off of.
and I don't know how many people know this, but back earlier this year, we launched a pen test project management tool, and I think a lot of people assumed it was going to be like AI pen testing and automated pen testing, which, for the record, I don't really believe in. But what it did was it was just automation. We're not doing. I mean, there's machine learning pieces in like the scanner and the vulnerability scanner, but as far as our pen testing, it was just like streamlining. There were so many things that our project managers specifically, you mentioned project things that our ethical hackers were doing that was not actual hacking. It was report writing and it's clicking buttons and sending emails and just there's so much streamlining that can happen within businesses. And yeah, I mean, I think that's so underrated, especially when you're talking to like, stakeholders and, there's all this pressure around revenue drivers and efficiency is revenue. And I think that's so important for companies
100%.
to prioritize as well, not just what the customers are seeing, but just what's happening behind the scenes.
I always say if your organization generates a report for anything at all, regardless of what you do, you should be looking at artificial intelligence to
Yeah.
augment that process because it's way better, way faster, way more efficient. And the people internally within your company don't like writing that report. So you're going to have an employee satisfaction score that goes up. It's a
Yeah. I think
win-win
report
all
writing is just
around.
overall across all industries, like the biggest hatred.
100%.
Yeah.
That and
Time
time
cards. Well,
cards.
a lot of that's automated now. So, one question I don't want to ask you is what's coming in 10 years of AI? Because I know that you get asked that all the time and there's no way we can possibly know about it. But even just like shorter term, like what are the things people should kind of be on the lookout for? Is there going to be a lot more governance coming? Is there going to be like, obviously, this is the worst that AI is ever going to be in terms of like quality, like that's going to keep improving. So, what are some of the things people can look forward to and also that they should look out for on a short term?
Yeah, super short term, right? Like a year-ish. My personal expectation is you're going to be shopping in a completely different way next year versus this year, specifically online, right? Grocery store shopping, right? At home food services, you're going to be able to just go and type in, hey, I have celiacs. Can you make me a 5 meals, lunches and dinners this week? Build a cart and send it to my house. And it's going to be like, yeah, great. And then the first time you do it, it's going to be AI enabled. And then the second through 200th time, it's going to ask you for feedback and information, and it's going to adopt those meals automatically and just generate the cart for you and ship it to your
Instacart
house.
Instacart already knows me
So
pretty
I've
well.
so now it's going to be adding a large language model on top of that and making what I would call hyper personalization, a true one-to-one experience where when you shop, it is for you and
Right.
not for people like you. Right. So I think that that's going to be the big one within the next year on that side of things. I also think that we're going to be in the calendar year, we'll see a big break when it comes to
Mm,
customized entertainment, which will be like individuals going on to Netflix or different new outlets and having themselves or their story told back to them using artificial intelligence or them inside of a story that's created by someone else. I think that that's something that's going to be super interesting. And I think that leads us down the education route. I think education is on the cusp of being radically transformed with one-to-one personalized experiences when it comes to learning the way that I learn. If I could take the bar and the bar actually comes to me in concepts that are spatial in 3D models and that type of stuff, and I can understand these concepts better because I'm getting a visual aid versus just text, I'm more likely to pass that exam. So I think that that's also going to be some of the stuff on the pro side for sure.
I
Much
mean,
on the
there's plenty of
con
them,
side
but
yet, though.
I think it is important to like everyone to just like think about those exciting pieces of it and the good stuff that is coming. And yes, there's scary stuff. I mean, there's always is. I mean, we always get asked about like deep fakes and what if this happens, and it's like yes, but we have bigger fish to fry on the security side. Let's change passwords. Let's do some simple stuff before we're worried about super complex deep fakes within your startup. So, I think there's so much more exciting things about it, and the security side is always going to be there and we should use it ethically, but the only way you can like learn to use it well is to jump in and use it. And I think about like, the prompts, that's a big piece that people are going to get so much better at learning how to do that. Like if you think about Like my dad, no offense, dad, if you're listening, like when he types into Google, he types in like full questions with question marks and please because he didn't grow up
Yep.
using Google prompting, I guess. I don't know if that counts as prompting. And it's the
Yep.
same with ChatGPT. Like
Yeah.
we're all going to learn to use it better. And, I'm really excited for the things coming out of the next couple of years.
Yeah, the one that I will add on is on the non-user end user side, right? On the like LLM, ChatGPT, OpenAI, Anthropic side, we're going to start to see two big tools that come out that'll affect businesses. The first one is like reasoning agents. So we kind of have one now with ChatGPT 401, which is touted as a reasoning tool, right? You ask it a complex question, it'll break
Mhm.
it into steps, and then those steps becomes prompts, and then it'll provide you back feedback, right? Takes a little bit longer. It's not actually doing reasoning to be fully transparent, but it's doing reasoning adjacent work. So I think that that's going to be really interesting. And then autonomous agents, where you say to your CRM, hey, can you send an email blast about this recent case study
Mhm.
that we just did related to
Yeah.
joepipefitters.com, right? And it goes and makes a case study. It goes and selects the people that are like the Joe Bob Pipe Fitters, goes and curates the email list, deploys the email list, and reports back that it's sent in an A/B testing format. So, the 50 got this one, 50 got this one, and here's your results back. I think that is going to happen as well within the enterprise level tools and start to get rolled down into, the SMB market
Yeah,
for
I think that's my
tools as
own
well.
internal bias that I need to overcome is the autonomous side. I mean, I'm a control freak and I still just like it's just this internal bias where I just want to see it first. I want to like press approve. And I think that's going to be something that we all have to get over. But obviously it's a trust gap. Like we're going to bridge that trust, to an extent. One question related to that before we wrap up. A lot of people talking about like local versions of ChatGPT and you want to talk about pros and cons of that real quick? I mean,
So human in the loop always. So I'm on your side when it comes to like pushing the approval button before anything gets done. I don't think machines should be left up to anything. Cough, cough, Skynet. Two, running models on your phone or on a desktop, I think are going to be much more likely as well. Some of the smallest models like Llama 3.1 Micro and ChatGPT 4.0 Mini, they're going to be able to be run on your desktop. They're able to be run on your desktop now. You don't need a high performance computer. MacBook Pros are running them at pretty good latency. So the models will continuously get smaller and be adopted onto your phones and that type of stuff. There is like general security privacy questions when it's running on your phone and accessing everything that you do. And then it's being cloud hosted versus on device, which is a little bit sketchy, but could be a 4-hour conversation. But yeah, I think that they'll continuously get smaller and you'll have the power of the first versions of Chat GPT and more reasoning, more higher compute power, higher expectations and output and ability for output as we go through the next couple of years. So yeah, I think we'll get more AI enabled
mhm.
computer systems that are in our
Now,
day-to-day lives.
say that to say though, also people that doesn't mean that just because you have a local version means you should input a bunch of sensitive PII, which I think is like my
No.
only fear is that when people do the local versions, like, they're like, okay, well, now it's mine. So now I can put whatever I want, like, still use it in a smart, secure way. And, you know, we'll do our
Yes.
best.
Yeah, I mean, right, Claude just came out yesterday and it's controlling the desktop of a Windows system through prompting. It's going and opening up different browsers, it's going and adding different things, doing different stuff just by prompting on platform, right, on Windows, and it's running Windows, exe files, if you want to call it that much. So yeah, it's gonna move fast. That just because it moves fast
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's super secure.
Well, Rob, this was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you joining. I guess final thoughts for anyone listening that's kind of either overwhelmed or wants to jump in. Any final advice or thoughts?
Yeah, don't be scared. Use them, try them, engage with them being AI tools. Don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Contact me on LinkedIn, right? Shoot me a message. Shoot Valentina a message. Reach out and ask questions. It's okay. The technology is new enough where no one's an expert. No one knows everything that's going to happen. Even your brilliant and most smart minds that are out there that went to MIT, UC Berkeley, etc., they're still a little bit confused how
Yeah.
things work and operate. So it's okay for you to not be 100% sure on how you're going to implement them. it's okay to have a little bit of humility. Just don't bury your head in the sand. That's really
Yeah, I love
the
that
final
advice,
note.
Rob. Spot on. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day.